Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Melissa and Lori Love Literacy Podcast. We are thrilled to have you here today because we are going to talk with some folks who are working on a literacy documentary. And Melissa, I don't know about you, but I feel like this is something I've dreamed of for a long time. So I'm happy that they're executing my dreams.
We actually talked. We talked about this. We thought maybe we could do it, but I think that we have the right people who are taking on this task. But yeah, when we found out that there's a documentary being made about some of the things that we talk about all the time on our podcast, I mean, I'm ready. I'm ready to watch it. I know it's not ready yet, but I'm ready.
I know. Yes, we want it on like the Netflix top 10 list so that all of the parents and teachers and everyone can. And I don't even know if it's going to be on Netflix, but I'm hoping it is. So we're going to hear from the team today and learn a whole lot about it. So welcome, Nora, John, and Nick. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you all wouldn't mind, we'd love to just hear a little bit about each of you and your background and what brought you to this project. And just tell us about yourselves before we launch into lots of great questions about the literacy documentary itself. So I'm going to start with Nora because she's right to my left and I have met her before. So,
all right. I'm Nora Shabazi. I'm the founder of EVLI, which stands for Evidence-Based Literacy Instruction. It's a comprehensive system of teacher training and student instruction. But my part in the documentary is I am a volunteer consultant, actually. And what I am doing is a lot of the background information, getting that to Nick and the documentary team, inviting people who are coming on, from researchers to parents to everybody in between, and finding, what we can to make the job easier for Nick and his team. So it's very exciting. Also joining in on traveling around the country and a lot of the interviews. So that's been really exciting and eye-opening too.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Yeah,
it has been.
I think you have a really fun part in this, Nora, and an especially impactful part too. That you can pull all of the research and all of the great, I don't know, like articles that are like currently coming out, right, to really help support the need for this documentary. So thank you for what you're doing.
Is there's so much and trying to keep it streamlined enough so that Nick and everybody, they don't run screaming from all of it. So yeah, it's been very exciting and it's really an honor to do this for sure.
Yeah,
That's
great. Nick, I imagine you may not have known anything about the literacy world before you joined. So I'd love to hear your background next. And then John, we didn't forget about you, John.
You can't forget about John. John is the reason. So it's funny. I got an email from John saying, our mutual friend, Jack Canfield, said, I should speak with you about a documentary. And I love Jack Canfield, a great guy. And I thought he was referring a friend over. So I said, okay, cool, neat. What do you want to do a documentary about? And John said about literacy and my story. And I did what I feel like I have to do more often than not now is sort of like, oh, that sounds really interesting, but I'm super busy. And so, and part of it is honestly to see how interested somebody really is, because there's been so many things in my life that I've found that if I'm more into it than you are, this is not going to work. And so I was like, oh, I'm super busy. And then I got the email that I was sort of hoping for back from John, like, no, I don't think you understand. This is really important. It's a big topic. I was like, okay, let's engage. And so since then, I don't know how long that was now, maybe 9 months ago. It feels like 10 years in a great way, as much as I've gotten to know John and Nora and this topic. And it's such a crazy thing that the world is not talking about this. I mean, I'm a dad of 3 kids. I've got a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, and one that turns 10 this month. Thankfully, I think like most of the world, it seems like most of the world of people that I know because there seems to be discrepancy in, more affluent schools than there are in schools of color and all these other things I'm learning as well, which are not shocking once you dig into them, but sort of in my little world, sort of everybody learned to read. My 3 kids learned to read, just, we worked with them as kids and they went to school and they were fine. And, I have some friends and, they got some remediation for some of their kids. And so, but I actually, from the moment I posted, I was working on this documentary, I had one of my son's friends' parents reach out and say, "Hey, we're really struggling with this. If you find anything, let us know." And the more I post about this stuff, the more I get these little messages. And I realize, like, as a parent who has not dealt with anything disastrous, I don't want to over dramatize it, but my oldest has ADHD, which, if you know me at all, is no shocker. And so, but when we were really going through sort of the early years of kindergarten, first grade, second grade, where, from about kindergarten, they pulled us aside and said, "Hey, he might have an auditory processing thing." And we're like, "Well, what is that?" First of all, I've never heard of this. And, and then being like dad versus mom in a great way, like, he'll be fine. Versus like, I think he really needs help, and so like that sort of normal thing. And it's like, but when you're in these like private hells, right? These little moments of where you don't know what's right. You don't know what to do. Yeah. You have plenty of people around you just saying it all works out in the end. And it does for most people. It really does. That's the good news. But it's like, there's these moments and these long moments of just pain for parents when you're trying to figure out what is the right thing for my kid. There's snake oil salesmen everywhere. There's psychiatrists everywhere. There's psychologists everywhere. There's school counselors everywhere. And you really just don't know who to trust. And then you got some parent over here who's saying, "No, everyone is wrong. I got this thing that really worked for my kid." And everyone means well. There's nobody who's like trying to screw over your kid, but it is so confusing. And so to me, what's fascinating about this topic is that there's so much I don't know. There's so much I'm learning as I go. There's so much that comes out every day. Like, that's the hardest part. Nora was saying, like every week, Nora sends like 20 new articles, which is great. It's just like the doc can't ever end. I mean, if we had a never ending budget, I would just like make part 12 right now, because we probably have enough for that, and then move to 13 next week. But so it's a really big topic, a really important topic. And I'm super thankful that, John has dedicated his life to it. And that Nora, is helping us figure out a way to connect with everybody. So I talked too much, but that's sort of my journey in this deal.
And Nick, just for our audience, can you tell, like, what do you do on a daily, like, what's your job?
Oh man. I make documentary. Well, I raise my children. I try to be a good husband, and I make documentaries and I write country music. That's pretty much what cool. I do.
I want to be friends with you just from that bio, just so you know.
Right, cool. You're in. It's very easy.
Country music is my jam, and I love documentaries. So I feel like I have lots of questions and ideas for you.
Game on.
Awesome.
All right, John, yes. You made this happen.
Well, I didn't make it happen. We're just making it happen. And like Lori said, she had a dream to do a bio. And my literacy experience goes back 75 years before you guys were born. I was dreaming about how do I get out of the dumb row? And how did I get into the dumb row? And I was a little boy with high hopes when I went to school at 6, and I ended up in the dumb row. And today we call it special ed or learning disability classes, remediation classes. And that's where I started. And I finally got out. And at the age of 48, I started learning how to read. Graduated from college without knowing how to read, reading about the second grade level. Graduated from high school, never failed a course. It's a long story. And I've had an opportunity to tell this story, but I always felt like once I learned to read, I wanted to tell the world about my secret. I guarded my secret for 48 years. I wanted to share the world, the story, the good news that it's never too late to learn to read, and we can, and my brain isn't broken, and I'm not dumb. And where are you, second grade teacher? You shouldn't have never put me in that dumb row. I didn't belong there. And all those crazy things that have gone through my head. But having the opportunity to tell a human interest story, teacher who couldn't read, millionaire that couldn't read. Those were the headlines when the story broke. And I used my human interest story to open doors. What I really wanted to do, it was one thing to tell a story and get people to feel the story and know that to solve any problem, you have to articulate the problem. So I worked on articulating the problem through my own personal experience. And that was my credibility. I wasn't an academic. I wasn't an intellect or a researcher. But I did have the passion. And I guess the opportunity, though, not only did I dream about this documentary, I prayed about this documentary before I even knew what I was praying for. I prayed when I was 8 years old, please, Lord, let me get out of the dumb row. Tomorrow when it's my turn to read, let me read. And I think repeating the story, I feel like a country singer, when you have a popular song and you have new songs and you want to sing them and your fans want you to play the same one. And I got tired of my same one,
Yeah.
And so it's evolved there, but getting to discover Nick and for Nick to be there waiting for my prayer to be answered. And you can see we're all five of us here right now. We love literacy. And once you get bit by this bug, outsiders don't really understand, our passion. But it's a passion for me. Now, it's not my story. It's not the little boy that was in the dumb row or the angry teenager or the teacher who couldn't read. It's not that anymore. It's the millions of children that are trapped right now in their illiteracy or subliteracy. And so that's a great responsibility that we have right now in doing this documentary. And we are doing the research, and we have the credibility, I believe, in asking the experts across the nation. Nora's been writing to them. I've been talking to them. And I don't think I would, I know I wouldn't have even attempted it without Nora. And I think Nick is pretty impressed with the amount of research that Nora has done also. And with that, we've all done. And people have signed on from Harvard to the classroom to parents. And we have a horrendous and a great responsibility here to get this documentary right. And from the beginning, I think all three of us talked about producing something that's never been done before. And we want to try to change the conversation. And for me, I like to see it's one thing to identify the problem. We know the problem. It's ancient problem. And it's certainly been here all of my life. And I would like to see us focus a little bit more on results. And I think that we've talked about it's perfect timing for this documentary. We're all waking up in a way in terms of how many children aren't getting it. Mm-hmm. And I think the key, it's been there for a long time. I was looking at some old videos yesterday of myself trying to kind of get myself psyched up for this podcast. And I discovered I was saying some things 25 years ago that I've been saying for 25 years. I thought I just said it yesterday, and I've been thinking about that. And the key to my success in learning how to read was proper instruction, and proper instruction came from a properly prepared teacher. And I was fortunate enough to have Pat Lindemuth. I don't know if folks know about Pat Lindenmuth. Pat Lindenmuth was really the pioneer in what I needed. I had a severe auditory discrimination problem, and 100 hours with her at her clinic took me from the second grade nonsense word attack skills to the 12th grade level. So it was like an explosion. And so one of the things I kept asking her is this just for me, or can everybody have it? Can we teach the world to read? And that's, I met Nora. Nora and I have been talking for 12 years. And sometimes we have to, the two of you will probably do the same thing sometimes. You have to lift one another up, because why can't they get it? Why can't the big people get it? Why can't we solve this problem? We go to the moon and we leave cameras on Mars and send pictures back, and we can't teach our children how to read, write, and spell. And it is. I'm gonna cut myself off so we can have some conversation. But there's no way anybody, including John Corker, no matter how smart or clever you are, you can't maximize your fullest potential without the basic reading and writing skills. And there's no way you can succeed in school. And education, we talk about education. America's beating the drum for education. Let's talk about the foundation of education. Let's talk about reading and writing skills. And if you don't get it by the third grade, you can't succeed in the classroom or in the workplace. Yeah. And I'll let you guys say about yourself, because I know you all have a passion now.
Yeah,
that's what's really so sweet about me having this opportunity, and those people that we're going to have in this documentary that Nick's going to be interviewing, and we've already started. How many interviews have we done already, Nick?
50. I don't know.
Wow. I think we
not quite 30, Nick, but it probably feels like 50.
Oh. I think we have some crossover too. We've had some guests on our podcast who you're also including in your documentary, right?
Okay, good.
Yeah. Nora, do you? I know you've had Emily Hanford and Natalie Wexler. Are there any other ones? When I looked through the list, I wasn't sure.
Oh gosh, you do have. You put me on the spot. I wasn't ready for that question. But
no, it's okay.
Tim Shanahan. You guys have had him, right?
Oh yeah, Shanahan. Yes,
Tim Shanahan, yes. And I'm trying to think. Did you have Nadine Gabb?
No, not yet, but
Melissa's taking notes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean the great part is that it is the same, not the same conversation, but it's the same. Like John said, you've been saying the same thing for a long time, and we feel like sometimes our conversations are like, okay, the same thing over and over again, and how do we make it fresh and new so that there's a new take on it? But it's not really a new concept. It's just a new way to approach the conversation or the concept, because the concept is what it is.
Yep. I'll sell you Nora's interview list for that's all you need for your podcast for the next 40 years. You got it.
Julie Washington. I have you. Julie Washington. I don't know if you had.
I love Julie Washington.
Maria
on my list.
Did you have Maria? I noticed that you had Laura, but I don't know if you had Maria Murray, the founder of the Reading League.
Yes, they sent us Laura, which we were super excited for.
Yeah,
she was
awesome.
She was wonderful. Yeah.
We've been telling the story and sharing the information and sharing the good news about the science. There's a science to this, and we've got it. If we've done anything right in the last 25 years, we've got the science, and we're ready to implement that. And that's the challenge for us, to bring the awareness and then the action. And then the results. We're leaving out the results all the time, Did we have a problem? Yeah, it's quite obvious we have a problem when half our students are reading at below their potential. And I think that I think the other thing is that we've said it, but we know we haven't reached a lot of people in the education at the university level that teach teachers. We haven't even. They're still sleeping.
Yeah. That's so funny. Sorry, Lori.
No, go ahead.
I was on the this Facebook group that we always talk about that talks about the science of reading, and they always are bringing, like, someone's always like, let's talk about this new science that's out, and there's always someone that responds like, this isn't new science. Like, this has been around. You guys are like, we're just hearing about it. But I actually just saw something today which really struck me, which says the praxis exam that reading specialists have to take to become certified. Everyone was talking about this, that this is not, it's balanced literacy. It's the old way. And this is the test that certifies reading specialists to help students who are struggling readers. And I was just kind of floored by that. That's kind of what you were saying, John, is like, not everyone is caught up.
One of my dreams for certification would be for anybody that got a teaching credential would have to have taught a child, a teenager, an adult how to read
100%
before they got their credential. And we'd have to find some college instructors that know how to do that also to teach those people. But we've got it here. That's the exciting piece of it. There is a solution. And there's a lot of interruptions and there's a lot of distractions, but I can remember my teacher telling me to focus. I'm looking out the window for the good stuff and focus. And here I am now telling them, hey, focus on reading. The
best part I think that I've seen is that there's nobody who means poorly in this. Now, I haven't interviewed anybody at a major book publishing company because it does seem to be that I don't think it's I don't want to pass any judgment there. We've all been in business, had families to feed. I don't think anyone's walking into a major publishing company going, we're going to publish stuff today that fails kids across the country. However, there seem to be some culprits there, or either that or it's an easy blame because everyone blames them. So I don't know yet. As a filmmaker, I'm trying to find the truth because I'm interested because I think all of us, if we found the answer, even if it was not what we thought it was, we'd be happy. And that's great. So, but I haven't found anyone who doesn't mean well. It's just really interesting though, how sort of out of date a lot of things really seem to be. And then you're also talking about let's talk about the educational institution. Okay, so right now we're focused on literacy, which is a major cornerstone of it. But then once you get past the fluency of that, it's just sort of, you take you take a 10th grade AP class maybe in literature, but other than that, you're just sort of reading along the way, right? And it's like, there's so much else that's broken too. And you talk about these systems that were invented, just in a different day and a different time. And it's just going to be, I think the pandemic, actually, one of the best results of the pandemic is it showed so many of us in so many fields, like what wasn't necessary, what was an old way, what was just a habit, what did we not need to do anymore. And so I'm hopeful that this entire assembly line industrial revolution educational system can be broken down at some point too. However, I would say all the rest of it, I think, is so much less, I don't say so much less important. That's probably way generalization, but if you can't learn to read, you're pretty screwed. Let's be honest. I mean, Nora, I saw Nora teach a 60-something-year-old man how to read in 5 or 7 days, whatever it was. And you literally saw the guy become a different human being. I mean, from the moment I met him, he was super anxious, nervous, and I get that. But what I started realizing is what a big moment it was for him, because he even was nervous. Like, what if I can learn to read? What if the story I've been telling myself my whole life isn't true? What if I learned to read and now I can no longer use it as an excuse to not achieve greater things in life? What's my new place in life? But what was fascinating from the first night we had dinner, he kept saying, well, my brain's broken. And I literally had to stop at one moment. I'm like, man, you're a really bright guy. You got to stop telling yourself this, because this self-talk is not helping anyone. And at worst, it's sounding like rhetoric. So you just got to stop. We believe in you. Just let Nora do her thing. And then we'll talk at the end of the thing. And day by day by day, you literally saw this man's anxiety go away. You saw it, his physical manifestations of twitchiness, jitteriness, uncertainty. It was like a different human being. And I'm like, this poor man had to live this way, 50 something years longer than he should have, because something along the way, people, systems, whatever it was, failed him. And I think most importantly to all of us, none of us want that. And John went through that obviously too. And I think what says everything you need to know about John is he goes, is this just for me or can everyone else have this too? Like from the moment he figured it out, he's like, I want to go get all the other kids from the dumb row. Come with me, and it's like, that's really what the goal of this thing is to show people that there is a way. And I think one of the ways John sucked me into this is, and we all have these moments. Like it's not a thing that's just me. Like I remember the day in third grade, we were doing multiplication tables. And I thought at some point, they would just make sense. This is how not smart I am. I thought you didn't have to just memorize these. Like I was a little bit lazy with multiplication. I thought, at some point this is just going to make sense. So I didn't memorize them. And so the teacher called on me and I didn't know the answer because it didn't make sense. And she said, Nick, you're so stupid. And I remembered that day and that moment and the way I felt. And I think I've processed it now, 30, however many years later, because I'm still not that good at math. And so, but she made me, by the way, have a disdain for math after that. I realize now, thinking as an adult, she probably was just having a bad day, but it probably drove me in life. I might need to thank her. Probably drove me in life to prove to the world I'm not stupid. Right. But, we all have these moments in life that sort of define these stories, the story we tell ourselves. And I would hate to think that I know there's millions of people out there that were like John or like David, who've been telling themselves this lie for decades and what it's ruining in their lives and not allowing them to experience. I believe every sword cuts both ways. So I'm sure it must provide a richness that maybe I can't understand in some way, or it provides a heart that John has to make sure when he got his turn that he's going to the ends of the earth, where someone who it came easy to, it just writes it off. So we'll say there's a blessing in it, but it's just crazy to think how many people are being in every element of education are being left behind because there's one way that's supposed to work. And we all know that it just doesn't. Every kid is different. I was fooled into thinking I didn't like learning. I literally 3 weeks ago, I realized this. Again, not that smart. I'm like, you know what? I really like to learn. Because if you would ask me, do you like to learn? I'd be like, heck no, I don't like learning. Because to me, learning is sitting in the classroom for 8 hours a day, listening to someone squawk on in the front of the room. And like, John, I'm looking for the good stuff out the window, or I was passing notes to girl. I was trying to find life, And so we can do better. And I think that's the whole point of this documentary that I'm trying to get across is I'm really not, we'll see how it all plays out, but I don't think blame is going to help anybody. I think we all would agree with this. It's just but we can do better. Can we just all agree we can do better? And if we can agree to that, if that's step one, if that's agreement number one, all right, what is agreement number two going to be? And can I get you to agreement 3 or 4 or 5? And it's going to take a decade. It's going to take way longer than we think it should be. But hopefully with things like this, at least a parent who's struggling or a teacher who's struggling to teach certain kids. I've interviewed so many teachers who are like, once I figured it out, this big secret, I was so pissed off. They were like, this is so angering that I wasn't given the tools. And so there's so many people trying to do the right thing. And I just think there's so many people who've been left in the dark. And I'm just really hopeful that we get as much of a percentage of those people to realize there is a better way, we can do more. And here's some solutions. And there's multiple solutions, by the way. There's a bunch of different programs. There's a bunch of different things that do work, and just find the thing that works for your kid. Don't be hopeless, and don't buy the lie that your kid's never going to have, more than a sanitary engineer or whatever you call it these days. Right. There's more that you can have.
I'd like to see the reading wars come to an end. Also, I love Nick's testimony, the discovery, and I've always felt that literate people really don't understand the impact that it has on a human being and the impact it has on the nation. because of those human beings. And adults, just like David, you were speaking to about, I bought into the big lie. That's what happens to us. We buy into the big lie, and we see ourselves as. My mother and father told me I was a winner for the first 6 years of my life. I went off to school just to learn how to read and be as smart as my parents told me I was. And by the time I'm 8 years old, I'm a loser in this system. So it's heavy. And I think that adults also, we're suspended in our childhood emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, academically, and spiritually at a lot of different levels. So after we get the proper instruction, we've got to go through a healing process. And we're survivors, but we've been scarred, and we have to deal with it. And I think that was when you were speaking to David at dinner that night, Nick. You were just, hey, you're a human. You're okay. This is human to human. And we almost see ourselves as subhuman. We're outsiders. We really, by the time we get to about the 3rd or 4th grade, we can't perform. We don't know the language. And in the classroom, in the schoolhouse, the dominant language is the written word, and we don't know it. It's like Chinese to us. Yeah. So I think about how I disrupted other people's education, because by the time I was in the 5th or 6th grade, I was tired of being the good boy, and I was mad and sad. And I had fights in the classroom, and I took over a lot of classrooms. I made teachers cry, and they made me cry. And sometimes I hear people say, well, kids with learning disabilities, they have emotional problems, and they have behavioral problems. I say, teach us how to read, and we won't be so crazy. Just teach us how to read. And that's really the focus. And people ask, where were my parents? Well, they went to school, and they had the conferences, and the teachers told, Johnny's a smart little boy in elementary school. He's smart. He's just a little behind in reading, but he'll get it. That story was told 1,001 times. It's been told for 80 years now in the schools. And teachers are still, and administrators and counselors are still saying that. Mm-hmm. And so I said we were sleeping, but we also are in denial. And the other thing that I love about Mike or Nick is that he's not a blamer. He is seeking the truth, and that's what Nora and I are doing too. That's what you two are doing. That's what this program is about. Is we're seeking the truth together without blaming one another. But I got to admit, I'm not interested in any more excuses. I've heard them all. And it's time for us to break this cycle that's crippling the nation and schools. We call for improving our schools. Well, focus on the foundation. That's what holds it up is reading. And I don't see any headlines where it's not sexy. It's not. It's just not.
I know.
And also the challenge, the reality of it's like watching grass grow. You know, I had some work in progress films with Pat Lindemood. You know, and I was so anxious to show my friends. You know, as we were reading. You know, I got it. And this is Pat working with me, and they said it was boring. It's the most exciting experience I ever had in my life. So those are some of the challenges that we have in selling this thing. But,
John, I think that's what some of, when people learn about the science of reading, they're like, well, kids are going to be bored, studying the same topic and building all this knowledge on the same topic over a long period of time and learning the foundational skills explicitly in a direct way every single day, repeated over and over. But I have yet to meet a child who's bored by that. And when we think about the impact of not doing those things like you spoke about. I was listening to a podcast where Oprah was being interviewed, and she shared a sentence that made me think so profoundly about literacy and what you just spoke about in terms of your childhood experiences dictate your path as an adult and how you bring those experiences into adulthood. And I'm really curious to know, and I think this is a question for Nora, the negative self-talk that the adults that you work with and who are bringing this negative self-talk from childhood because of their lack of ability to read and really their lack of being taught to read, I want to say, not their ability. Yeah. So their lack of being taught to read. I want to be really intentional there. I wanted to know, how has that self-talk, has that self-talk all been the same? Has it been different? Is it always negative? When they learn to read, what does that transformation look like? And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because I know in your documentary, you're going to show a little bit about teaching someone to read and teaching an adult to read. And I think, John, you mentioned David, his name is David.
Yeah. Yes.
What I would say is that mostly what we do is we teach teachers, ideally classroom teachers, so that we can put the fence up and we don't have Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall, as opposed to all the ambulances trying to put Humpty Dumpty together. Ideally, classroom instruction, tier 1, we teach them right in the first place. We do not have the Davids and the John Corcorans. That's the number one thing. Some need some, repetition, put them in tier 2 and 3 to give them more error corrections and such. But so we do mostly focus on classroom teachers and coaching there. But I also have a reading center where kids walk through our door, multiple kids every single day, and adults who are traumatized from the age of 5 and 6. I mean, kids with ulcers, kids on medication, because they are this is what they think of themselves. I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm broken, and I can't. There's something wrong with me. It never occurs to them that the instruction that I've been given has caused a lot of my problems or has prevented me from being able to become a reader. So it depends. John was just telling me a story yesterday. His daughter does Ebley, and she was teaching a 10-year-old in Los Angeles public schools, is where this child was from. And she just in the first 2 hours, she's like, "Oh my gosh, why didn't anybody teach me this? This actually makes sense, and I can get how it goes." Like David was just like, "I get now how there's a joy of reading." When anybody would say a joy of reading, I wanted to punch them. Like, what do you mean a joy? This is torture. So that self-talk is very common. It's almost it is universal, really, across everybody that comes. Then, like the 10-year-old, there's this thinking of like, wait a minute, if I could learn this now at 48 with John or 62 with David or 10 years old, why didn't I learn this at 5 or 6? The only reason they didn't learn it at 5 or 6 is because they weren't taught it. And what they were taught not only didn't work, but a lot of times caused more difficulties and challenges. And so they can't get to that joy of reading. They can't, it is so across the board. And the interesting thing, and John was actually the one that helped me realize this, probably 10 years ago or so, a teacher I trained had written a book about her experience. And she sent me a chapter. I asked John to read it. And John said, I was reading out loud to Kathy, his wife, in the kitchen. And I stopped in the middle of it. Now, this is how many years? I don't know, 20 some years after he learned to read. And he's like, wow, I'm a good reader. It didn't occur to him that he was a good reader until this is what we see all the time. These kids know, they see. It doesn't matter that nobody tells them that you are dumb or stupid or you can't read. They get that. They see that. They think that they're the only one. The interesting thing one day is we had 2 kids one leaving the classroom and one or the center and one coming in, and a nearby, maybe 20 minutes away school district. The one kid, the mom said, the teacher said she's never had any kid that has this struggle. She's never seen this before. Walking out, they come across one of his classmates coming in, who this teacher had told the mom the exact same thing. I don't know what the problem is. It's your kid's problem. I don't know why they're, not reading. So we do not understand that what happens in kindergarten and first grade and third grade results in all of us being impacted by this horrific travesty of now we have a whole lot of people. The jails are full of subliterate and illiterate people. We've got, not only multimillionaire David and of course John, and then we have a cardiovascular surgeon, Nick is going to be interviewing. There is all kinds of people in every single person's world, every person's world, who is struggling significantly. And as they get older, once they get to middle school and high school, as John said, you want to see who the struggling readers are? The ones who are the behavior problems, the ones who are the class clowns, or when they get to be adults, they've perfected how to hide. You have no idea the trauma that's going on with 2/3 of the people in your world because of this exact situation. I had a discussion last night. I was out at dinner with like 8 people. Well, I graduated from University of Michigan, but I'm dyslexic and I can read well, but I can't comprehend. This is a principal, by the way, retired principal. And it was just like, this is so interesting. The stories and I said, well, if you can't comprehend, you really are not a good reader. That's just the fact that you can become one in really just a few hours, quite frankly, but you're not. And so how's that impacting your life? You're a principal, for goodness sakes. You have to read stuff 5 times to be able to understand it. That is not okay. We have the answers. The title of this documentary is The Truth About Reading. Let's talk about the truth. Let's be honest on every side of the reading wars and in between. Let's be honest about what's truly going on. We do not have anywhere near 95 to 100% of our kids and adults proficient at reading. We have about 34. So, and then people get 50 and they're like, woohoo, we're at 50%. Don't celebrate. I mean, celebrate that you're making progress, but until you get to 95 to 100%, you cannot have high quality instruction or curriculum with all this great content if you can't read the words on the page. My kids, I took them out of a white collar, professional, suburban school district and put them in a district in Flint that was a charter school that was teaching back in the 90s core knowledge. All this great content that nobody in school was doing. And now it's starting to become a thing, thank goodness. But back then, no. And so I put them in a disadvantaged area where they got a much better education, but they could read also. I mean, I wouldn't let my youngest, after my middle daughter that I taught to read, my youngest wasn't getting anywhere near a school until I taught her to read. So the trauma of this is the suffering. And it's not just the suffering of kids, it's the suffering of teachers, because they don't know. They bought into the big lie too, that they paid all this money in college to learn how to teach reading, and they didn't. And it's also the suffering of parents and everybody. So the suffering to me is really the greatest thing, and then, so the invisible crisis hiding in plain sight, that's the subtitle of this documentary. That is the key. This is a crisis, and we got to get our heads out of the sand and look at what this is doing to the human beings who are impacted by it. So I get a little emotional and a little bit feisty about it, because it's like, come on, you guys, let's go. Let's go. Let's stop this.
Not only an emergency, it's an urgency. And I'm hoping that this documentary will preach that and teach that. We also have some challenges in this in terms of ruffling people's feathers. And you can only ruffle people's feathers to a certain point before they'll turn you off. But when you were talking about those, the term, we're going to be telling the truth. Are we going to be telling the truth about how, to me, this is my own personal, how harmful it is to label a human being learning disabled? I don't know any human beings that are really learning disabled. They're able to learn. We're able to learn. So maybe we ought to really consider not using that legal term anymore. We need to come up with some scientific language to describe, like John Corcoran had a severe auditory discrimination problem. He wasn't learning disabled. He learned his timetables on time. He knew how to count money and make change before he went to school. And I think that it's really time to really, and I know people have degrees in learning disability. So it's going to be a hard sell for me to get them to change that. And I don't want to be a sheriff or a word police or anything like this. I thought this way before the Cancel Society program started today. I thought about this 25 years ago. Fortunately, I went to school, and a lot of times after I learned to read, people said, "Were you learning disabled?" Well, I was never, I never let anybody tell me I was dumb or labeled this learning disabled in the playground. So none of my classmates said it more than one time. I had that experience, and they said, "Were you dyslexic?" And I said, "Well, the term dyslexic," I looked that up, and I was illiterate. I couldn't read or write. Being dyslexic didn't mean anything to me. I know there's a definition that I can agree with. And I think it says people that struggle with the oral and written language. That's me. I definitely struggled with it. But for me to say, yeah, I was dyslexic, other people explaining that's why I didn't learn to read. No, I didn't learn to read because I was illiterate and nobody taught me how to read. And we've only started talking about teaching dyslexics to read in the last 25 years. There's still people that say we can't teach dyslexic to read. Well, that's not true. And I'm hoping some nice, polite way say this. And also for the term, I would really like us to, the community, I know it's a legal term, but it's a catch-all term. Learning disabled, always learning disabled. It's an excuse not to produce from my perspective.
If I can jump in there, John, and say, whatever we label them, we can label them dyslexic or learning disabled or ADHD or whatever, LD, all kinds of Ds in them. It doesn't matter. The problem is the same. They haven't learned how to read. So the solution is the same. Teach them how to read. Boom.
I have a difficulty with my oral language, and you just did a better job of explaining what I was trying to say. Thank you very much. One other thing I wanted to comment on that little girl that my daughter just worked with for 2 hours. I thought at the end of the day, when she was, my daughter called me and told me that was a high for the day. She had this little girl, and that kept saying during the course of, why didn't they tell me this? Why didn't they tell me? She's 10 years old saying the same thing that teachers are saying when they get their proper instruction. I've heard this so many times, but it was really amazing to me. This little girl said, why didn't they tell me this? And obviously she didn't have any issues. She just didn't have any instruction. And she lived in LA and she didn't go to school last year. And that was a critical year that she missed too. And I think that's another opportunity that we have right now that people and parents are seeing firsthand. And I think this last year of kids being out of school and missing this instruction is going to be a call. I think that's why I feel like this is timely what we're doing here.
Yeah.
You guys have given me goosebumps.
I know.
Lori and I are always saying why aren't more people talking about this? It's just really exciting to have more people talking about it.
Yeah. There's such a need for systemic change. And, as we're all working toward that, one of the things that Natalie Wachsler said when we interviewed her is that parents are the sleeping giants. And so what I'm really hopeful that this documentary will do is not only reach educators, but also reach parents, because I think the more that we can get parents on our side, I'm imagining parents watching this documentary and thinking, oh my gosh, this is the problem that I've been having with my child. And I always think about it in terms of Nick, you mentioned you had 3 children. So if 34% of our population is reading, quote, they're readers. And, people, Nora, I agree with you. People do say well, yay, we got to 50%, or, oh my gosh, the numbers are going up. The data is increasing. Okay. So we get to 40% maybe, or whatever it might be. Nick, look at your 3 kids, and which one would you vote for as being the reader? Knowing, that is, to me, it's insane. No teacher, like you said, Nick, everyone has great intentions, right? And we're not blaming anyone. And Melissa and I love teachers. That's why we did this podcast. No teacher is looking at his or her class and thinking, you know what, this group of 10, they're awesome to move on to 4th grade as readers, but these other 12 kids, they're not going to go as readers. Every teacher wants every single student to leave as a reader, a writer, a thinker, a critical thinker. And I think that's just, it's so paramount to, this documentary is so paramount to all of that. And Yeah, I'm almost curious to ask you, Nick, like what has, as an outsider, if you will, what has struck you the most as you've been learning about all of this and working on this documentary?
I think what struck me the most is that, I feel like I more or less know what's going on in the world, and I had no idea this was a thing. Like, it just didn't seem like that was even possible. Like, I could understand that there's outliers in any scenario. Like, there's a small percentage of people across the globe that you could anything could happen to, or could have any sort of disorder or disease, and this is like 50+%, probably more like 60% of people. And it's like, wait, what? And I think one of the things that the term that really got me to sort of get it, I think at first, was subliteracy. The idea of it's like food insecurity. Like that made more sense to me than trying to tell me that there's someone who never has any food ever in life. Like, it doesn't make sense. But the fact that there could be kids that could go, and adults that could go home from a job or from school for the weekend and maybe have 1 square meal instead of the 6 they're supposed to. Oh, I could see that being possible. And so just starting to process and understand that. And the most eye-opening thing is that this is actually a problem, because I would never have guessed that.
I think I would add, Nick is a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
You made that statement. That's what I'm watching, the evolution. And we're fortunate that he has, I don't know, how many Emmys do you have in your work?
Well, I don't like to be objectified. I'm not just a number, John, but it's 22.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm speaking to the audience.
No, I'm kidding.
We are so fortunate to have, we know we have, we all love literacy, and we love teachers, and we know they're the people that need to have the tools that they need, and we believe they're not getting them, and most of them will confess to that privately, maybe not publicly, but they do. And I've heard it on your show. I've heard your stories, both of you. Your evolution is coming from the classroom to say, I didn't know, I didn't get it, and that, just like that little girl, why didn't they teach me? Why didn't they teach me before? But we have, literacy is a story, and proper instruction is a story, and we have a fantastic storyteller to tell it, and we have we're asking for the question that we ask these people that we reach out to for interviews is say, what do you think needs to be said? So we're doing that as much as we can. And of course we have the challenge, and then we're going to hand all these interviews over to Nick and say, okay, do your magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think another thing too, and that John touches on in all of us with our talking, for 25 years, I've been in this, and my background is actually in nursing, and it was my daughter that brought me into this, her struggles, but we've admired the problem. I have been through so much admiring the problem. This problem has been admired from every angle that can ever be admired from, and talked about and debated and discussed. And I think enough admiring. Let's move to action, and what's the solution, and what can we actually do? Instead of let's talk about it, what can we actually do? And I see this documentary, and Nick and his brilliance, and I think it's 23 Emmys, by the way, from what I've read anyway, that he's won. And his work is brilliant, by the way, of course. But what can be done? I see this not just as a documentary, and even we've had these discussions. Nick, I think this maybe should be a series. He has a series on Amazon Prime too. I'm like, how about that? Let's do a series. Because it's that.
I like that you're just leveling it up, Nora. You're like, one's not enough.
Why limit
We're going to
yourself?
give Nick, you could work on this till the end of your career.
Yeah,
I don't know how old you are.
Another 50 years,
we can give
Nick,
you
that's
enough
all
work.
we're asking. Come on, get on board here. Which he is. And his brilliance is beyond. But what are we actually going to do? Instead of I like it this way and you like it that way, and I'm right and you're wrong, and going on and on, like you were saying too on the Facebook pages too, Melissa. Sometimes I just have to take a huge break from that. Like, wow, are we talking about students in here anywhere? Anybody seen anything about, and my students did this and went that far? No, we're talking about I'm right and you're wrong. You're right and I'm wrong. I'm wrong.
Yeah. I like this. I like doing it this way.
Yeah, this is what I like, and so you better, So the solution piece and the action piece. What do we do? What can we do, and how can we make true change instead of some more admiring? I think is important.
Yeah. So we're actually going to ask you all as we wrap up today, what can we do? So if you could leave our listeners with a piece of advice, which might be about your documentary, I don't know, but whatever advice you want to leave for our listeners about what can we do?
I'd like to add a footnote to the story that we've been telling about the little girl that said, "Why didn't they tell me?" When her aunt came to pick her up, she was in tears and was hugging her aunt, who delivered it to the lessons. And I know this story is a story that a lot of teachers, millions of teachers, that's their story. They see that, they witness that all the time, and I guess that we talk a lot about teachers, but like Nora said, the students, and we need to love our children more. That's what we need to do as a country, and prepare them for a better life with the ability to read and write and spell. It changes lives. It saves lives. When I was interviewed by Oprah, she asked me, "What's the difference between you knowing how to read and not knowing how to read?" And I never had that question asked, and I don't know where my answer came from, but I've been repeating it because it's not even my voice. It's like it's my soul. It changed me. It's like having a soul, feeling the soul. And America it filled a big hole in my soul. That's what it did. And I think we can fill a big hole in America's soul too, by imparting these skills and improving the education for our teachers that have the heart. They have the heart. They have the art. They need the science. There is a science.
Yeah. And
we're ready to give it to them. We're ready to deliver it to them. Not me personally. I get people that know things. I've always been smart enough to recognize other people's skills, and that's. But anyway, it's huge. It's huge. It's huge and urgent.
Yeah. Nora or Nick, anything to add to that?
I'm going to say my to-do would be two things. One is ask yourself a simple question, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a parent, whether you're an adult learner or whatever, what do I need to do differently? If you are not a highly proficient reader and writer and speller, or if your students or your own children are not highly proficient readers, writers, and spellers, which I'm saying 95 to 100% of them, that's a great question to ask, because you do need to do something differently. It's not, we can't put a label or a blame or anything there. What can we do? Because that's the only thing we can control. That's the first thing. And the second thing is going to lead into what Nick's going to tell you about how to contact us and do this, is to donate. Donate to this documentary. Donate and help be part of the solution and the doing. Those are my two things.
Yeah.
I'll say that, number one, if you or someone you know is struggling with reading, know that it's not your fault and there is a solution. Like, I think that the most important thing, doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how hard it is for you, like literally there is a solution. Don't stop until you find it. I think beyond that, it also makes me think on another level, if you're experiencing that in any part of your life where things are really irregular for you and it seems so different for everybody else, just know there are solutions and you should be asking those questions. And there is someone out there that can help you. So I'd say that. And then, of course, I would say go to thetruthaboutreading.com. Help us out. Help us share this story. The world desperately needs it. At least 50% of the American population needs it. And I'm sure even more than that, across the globe. And I think there's a big message of hope in this for whatever anyone is going through. But I think, in this, we're certainly focused on reading, and there are solutions. And look, even if maybe you could have worked a little bit harder at it as a kid, like just let's get rid of the blame. Like you are where you are, let's call it like an umpire. I can either read it or I can't. If I can't, what do I need to do about it? Let's take the emotion out of it and let's just start finding solutions. And I think we've done this a lot in the doc, and to teachers, like, don't take this as this is not a blame on you. This is something that, I would invite you to the conversation as opposed to shoving it away, going, all these people talking about this stuff is just not true. Like, I think we can all look at the numbers and say they're not good enough. We could all do that. Like if you had to choose 1 out of 2 kids to read, you wouldn't do it. I know as a teacher, your heart isn't there. So instead of writing off this conversation, maybe start asking some different questions, because objectively, there's very clearly a conversation to be had, and you can be part of the solution.
And I think that too, to add on to that with Nick's, is how do we unite? How do we unite and tackle this together instead of continuing to, butt heads and divide? So that's a great question we could all ask ourselves, instead of putting blame, or instead of, defending when we don't have our kids 95 or 100%, how do we, use this whole, network of people who are doing great things and helping move the needle? And how do we get together and make all of our voices, increase our awareness, increase our education of it and then work together.
Grow our community too. We need more soldiers. And I also want to say, teaching a child to read. Teaching a child to read is an act of love.
It sure is. All right. Well, John, we are going to let you have the last word on that one.
Okay. I like that. I thought that was my last word, but
no, I liked that. That's what I was going to think. That is the last word. I love it.
We do need to inspire one another and support one another and critique one another. Mm-hmm. And you two ladies have done a fantastic job with your podcasts of doing that. And I've listened to a few of the ones that Nora told me these are the top ones to look at. I know she's looking at, but thank you too for inviting us.
Thank you.
And for inspiring.
We cannot wait to watch this documentary. We're so excited, and we will be sharing it widely with our audience, and
we'll link everything
to you all again, I'm sure.
Yes, we'll link everything in so that people can donate, and we'll share as much information as we possibly can with our audience. So thank you all so much for being here. We are so grateful for each of you for sharing your stories. And Nick, thanks for being a part of it. Even though literacy is not your bread and butter, you've got other things to bring to the party, and now you're getting schooled. So thank you.
Thank you all for having me. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful day.
You too. It's been an honor. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.